Oh yeah, that as well. They're also trying to use DNA and even organic tissue that's grown from that DNA to store or to be used as a store of energy, a store of memory. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, it's rather. I mean, you you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out where the hell this is going. You know, it's like every bad sci-fi movie come true. Yeah.
Namaste, Isme. How are you doing? I hope you're well. It's funny. I just mentioned Shinobi just 5 minutes ago. Is this the same Esme? That's Shinobi's partner. Might be a different Esme. I might be reaching for the stars here. But anyway, synchronicities tend to work that way. Welcome. I hope you're having a good day. I've just been looking it up, and it's interesting. It's not gold. The graphene is found often near gold deposits. Isn't that interesting?
That
Like
is very
I see
interesting.
here in South Africa, there's the greenstone belt. In Barberton greenstone belt, that's where they've got graphene and has been discovered in association with gold deposits. Isn't that interesting?
What is
I thought it was lead, but I was wrong. It was gold.
well, lead
And
is
I wonder whether there's some
lead,
relevance here
lead is
that
graphene,
it's
so
mined with gold.
lead would be graphene. So that's right. So I think you're correct in that.
I mean, I know that the pencil lead we call pencil lead graphene, and I've never quite been able to understand why we call it lead.
We call it it's like graphite, right? And then the graphene is like just a monatomic layer of the graphite, I think. Might be wrong with that. I think it's graphite, right?
It's something like that. Yeah. I mean, they use it to make these pencils. God knows what other. And while I was like looking down this rabbit hole, I noticed that they got plans to
Here. It says it right here. So
to
graphite is what's used in pencils. It's the naturally occurring form of carbon known for its softness. I don't know what the hell. The lead is toxic to humans. So are they trying to say it's not toxic? Oh, that's weird.
So listen to this. Graphene oxide, a derivative of graphene, has shown remarkable ability to bind and remove radioactive elements, including plutonium from water. Okay. Now, why is this important? Well, graphene oxide, so graphene likes oxygen, right? And it's like, what is there a lot of in the human body? So the alchemical processes in the body, could the graphene inside the physical body become graphene oxide? If so, if it's able to remove nuclear like plutonium from water, what other effects can that have on water in our bodies to do with the life force principle? I'm just throwing this out there because these profound nuclear active things tend to affect the adaptability of the DNA and the RNA strands, don't they? This is why cancer is an effect of nuclear toxicity, because it causes the adaptation systems in the body to go haywire. So it can overstimulate or understimulate the body's ability to adapt. And so when the body cells are adapting faster than what they should be, they start coming up with new patterns and creating new kinds of cells that are just randomly ridiculous, rather than step by step, test, try, it didn't work, let's try the next one. Just run down the road and try it. It's not working. Who cares? We're going to try something new. Sort of, it randomizes the way in which the adaptation works, doesn't it?
And before we get too far into that, this is now I haven't seen this. Apparently, graphite is considered something different than lead. They're trying to say graphite is actually not toxic, which I think that's bullshit because they use it in lithium-ion batteries, pencils. They're saying it's a natural carbon. That's why it's not toxic. But I think that's a new thing that they're putting online now. So just so in case people see that, they might want to double check all of this, because that doesn't sound correct at all to me.
Yeah, I think on those batteries they mix it with lead.
Yeah, but there's what I'm saying is they're saying graphite is not lead. They're saying it's different from lead, but this is the same sort of lead that's in pencils is actually graphite, and graphite is a different form of carbon than lead that's non-toxic. And they also use, they're saying graphite in lithium-ion batteries. So if it's being used in batteries, I highly doubt you're going to want it in your body. Like,
Yeah,
probably not.
they've. I remember looking into graphene a wee while ago, and for medical applications, they use the carbon nanotube form, which is essentially rolled graphene.
And that's synthetic,
And
right?
yeah, that's synthetic.
And
And
that's another issue because anything synthetically made usually has issues.
oh yeah, yeah. But the interesting thing as well, it seems to bind to human flesh or organic material very easily. And they noticed as well when it goes into the body, it almost automatically wants to go straight for the mind, the organ of the brain, for some particular reason, and to fuse with it.
It almost reminds me
That's
of
what they
black
found.
goo. Of like the idea
Yeah,
of black goo.
yeah, yeah. I mean, there's other issues it has as well. For example, they found, again, this was years ago, so there's probably more studies now. They found that it has coagulant effects,
Yeah.
hypercoagulant effects. So again, I don't want to bring up the event of 2020 and all of the ensuing things that occurred with that, but it does make you wonder.
Like we
Were we
know,
part
like
of a graphene
they did studies.
experiment?
They did studies on the masks that had little, like they had recalled these masks
Yeah,
that had graphene within them. So if graphene was such a safe fucking thing, I don't think they would have recalled the masks in the first place.
yeah, yeah. It's. I think honestly, in my opinion, I think it's to basically bring in what the quote quote academics or intellectuals were speaking about. For example, Yuval Noah Harari prior to well 2018, 2017, just prior to the event in 2020, where they wanted an internet of all things. They wanted everything inventorized and merged with some sort of digital mainframe or matrix. Absolutely insane. But ultimately, if you think of the notion that we are in an informational age, it's the next logical step. If you want to control all currents, all flow of information, and that is linked, the control of the flow of information is linked to power, then of course you're going to want to bring all informational systems into one centralized system. It's what power always desires. Yeah, I don't think it's healthy. It's interesting though that you mentioned, Franklin, that it's found near gold deposits, because obviously gold is the imperishable, incorruptible metal that you see in alchemy. So you have lead to gold, and it's the gold is this sort of it's a symbol. Once the green lion eats the matter, which is, in a technical manner, it's iron sulfate or any form of sulfuric acid that eats, or it's also called aqua regia, which is royal water, and that eats the gold, eats all the impurities in gold. And what color does that create in the solution? When you mix this aqua regia or sulfuric acid with gold, it creates a sort of red hue, a rubeda. Of course, the philosopher's stone, this is where we get this idea from. It creates the same color as the dawn, as a golden dawn. So, again, that's just the technical alchemical, the basis for it, at least in the symbolism. But it's interesting that
I think
is linked to graphene.
it's very interesting what you're saying here with the alchemy, because you mentioned something interesting about the brain, and I've just, while you were talking, like, I'm actually researching. By the way, this is called unscripted because it's literally unscripted. We're just having a conversation, and so that's just what's going on here. So because I do study a bit of like backstreet physiology and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's all part of the occult therapeutics curriculum, it's important to understand certain functions within the brain. Now, to look at what dopamine is and how important dopamine is, like, dopamine is not just about upliftment and being positive and being awake and happy, because obviously the dopamine affects the serotonin levels, affects all the different hormones in the body, actually. But dopamine specifically has got to do with muscular contraction. So if you don't have enough dopamine in your system, you can't get out of bed in the morning. So people who struggle to get out of bed in the morning is because they don't have enough dopamine. Obviously, for those of you that are interested in curing your system, the sun, sun gazing. It's an ancient practice. The ancient Egyptians rocked the sun gazing. Ancient Babylonians rocked the sun gazing. The Vedic Indians rocked. In fact, there's a reason why the most popular form of yogic postures is called the sun salutation, and that they said you should do it facing the sun in the morning when the sun is rising. There's a reason for all of that. It's not just accidental. So sun stimulates the optic nerve, and obviously there are cells in the eye which are like a triangular kind of cell, and these cells are found in the pineal, and they have a crystalline wall. And so there's almost like a kind of a piezoelectric kind of generation of charge when the photons touch this cell, and it's entangled with the pitch and harmonic frequency and quantum entanglement between that particular cell and the cell in the pineal gland, which is why sunlight stimulates your eyes to stimulate, apart from dopamine stimulation, the melatonin. And the melatonin is obviously going to regulate your diurnal nocturnal cycles of your circadian rhythms, and also your serotonin production, and a whole range of effects like dopamine. So this is really a powerful actual tool that you can use. I do it every morning. You should do it every morning. There's no reason not to get out of bed and watch the sunrise. And if you can't see the sunrise directly, that's okay. If you're looking at the eastern sky at the time of the sunrise, as much of the eastern sky as you can get, the light is filtering through, and those photons are still going to act on your light. And even if on your eyes, even if it's gray skies, it still works, because the light is still traveling through the water. The water is just like a lens. That lens gives the color gray, but so much radiation gets through to your eyes. It's not just the visible spectrum of light. There's a whole broad electromagnetic spectrum. But now getting back to the brain. Now, obviously, because of the monatomic size of graphene, it is able to cross the blood-brain barrier, because monatomic things are really, really small. They get into the bloodstream and they go right through the cell walls. Go figure. They're that small. The molecules are made out of atoms, right? And when you've got single atoms, they go right through molecules. That's how they work. It's got to do with their electric and magnetic field, that they're actually able to pass through the other fields. So that's how the graphene gets into the brain. Now, why does it damage the brain? There's a number of reasons why it damages the brain. There's a part of the brain called the I always forget this part of the brain's name, substantia nigra. Now, the substantia nigra is the part of the brain which is responsible for protecting the dopamine producing receptors in the brain. And those dopamine producing receptors obviously regulate your central nervous system and your ability to locomote, and the connection between the central nervous system and the locomotion in your body, as well as all the mental and emotional things that come with it. This is fundamentally important. So these dopamine generating cells have a reaction to metals. This is really important. So when you have too much iron in your body, it's one of the reasons why a lot of people are vegetarian, by the way, because when you take in too much iron, the iron collects in your brain, some of the dissolved iron. Like, there's trace elements of iron that's going to be running through your blood, and it's going to be breaking down. It collects in the brain. I'm going to bet that the oxides collect there too. Likely, I'm guessing. That's me just taking a long shot. But I know that the iron collects in that part of the brain. And the iron affects the electromagnetic field, right? So what happens is this neuromelanin is produced by the body as a sheath to cover and to protect the cells that generate dopamine from the magnetic electrical processes happening to the iron which is collecting in the brain, considering that the brain is a powerful electric conducer, producing electric fields, electromagnetic fields. Everything, every time your organ operates, there's a spike of electricity between the organ and the brain. Throughout every organ, every process in the body, the brain's part of the process through an electric field. And then, of course, your thinking. There are other fields being generated by your thoughts and your emotions, which are then going to affect how the brain speaks to that organ and how that organ responds. This is Taoist medicine, why there's emotions related to the brain, because there literally is. And so this is really important to understand, because the brain's continually working electrically, and all these electrical impulses generate an electromagnetic field within the brain, a series of fields that becomes sort of a composite electromagnetic field. In the same way that we've got an electrical grid on the earth, we have an electrical grid in the brain. So this obviously affects the, as we know, iron. You put iron next to an electromagnetic field, it becomes magnetic. This is going to affect the cell's ability to generate melatonin. So, dopamine. Those little dopamine cells is going to affect their ability to generate dopamine, and it can harm the cells. So the cells put up a field of neuromelanin, which is a protective sheath to protect those cells from the electromagnetic interference of the iron. Now, let's just back this up a minute. This graphene has these electrical qualities. So we can see that ME, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, and a whole host of other related illnesses, probably something like fibromyalgia might have some kind of reaction to this too, is obviously going to be related to this part of the brain being affected, because the dopamine and the poor regulation of the dopamine and the manufacturing of the dopamine supply and demand issues create other hormonal issues, create other problems in other parts of the system, which, one link in the chain's broken, all of the chain becomes compromised. And so I think there's a fundamental connection here between them wanting graphene in our brains and the dopamine. And if your dopamine gets affected, you're more likely to need robotic parts. Just think about this. You're more likely to be like, well, yeah, like how can you fix my body? Like, if your body's not working the way you want it to, then you'll be like, yeah, throw in some bits. Like, I'm ready for the transhumanist, sign me up. Now they're gonna need to get us to sign up to change our bodies, right? When parts of the brain don't work, they'll make a new piece of the brain that will go in there and will manage the dopamine receptors. In fact, maybe they'll have a artificial dopamine manufacturing center that they can put into the brain. Just think about it. A control chip of sorts. So I think that this is maybe connected to that. And then there's one more thing to add. So I was looking at this this idea that came to my mind about graphene oxide. And yes, graphene oxide generally oxidizes slower than iron. I like that. Generally oxidizes slower than iron. Okay, think, food for thought. So iron, we know, rusts. It rusts pretty fast when it's in contact with water, right? And salts. I live by the beach. I don't have a car. If I have a car by the beach, it rusts. It's not financially viable. It's cheaper to use a damn Uber. So basically, if graphene rusts a bit slower than what iron rusts, by putting graphene in the body, is it going to cause the graphene that doesn't leave the body to start to decay after a while and produce graphene oxide, which then gets us thinking graphene oxide in the body. And it has some like really weird effects. Like graphene oxide is a known contaminant, and graphene oxide, a nanomaterial, can interact with the human body in complex ways, potentially causing inflammation, immune cell activation, and even thrombogenicity, blood clotting, especially at higher concentrations. Now, what did we notice with the arm prick adventure?
Yes.
So they were using graphene that had maybe been stored near water, and it was very close to its oxidation point. It's not just that they put graphene in. What's the condition of the graphene? It's like, if you're going to put iron into food, okay. But what if you put rusty iron into food? what can that cause? Lockjaw? What do they call it? Tetanus.
Well, and that's, I think,
Because there's all sorts of things that grow on it as well. I don't know. What do you guys think? There's quite a lot to unpack.
I think that's part of the reason we were also seeing a lot of people going to the hospital with very low blood oxygen levels.
Yes.
Because it was almost like there was something like having this oxygen that's in their body, it was being latched onto by something inorganic that was in the body, and their oxygen levels were then dropping and
Exactly
to
what graphene
levels,
does.
to levels that were never, as far as I know. I have a few friends who were with their emergency, EMSs or EMTs, who were picking up people off the streets, bringing them in, and they were like, usually these people with such low blood oxygen levels would be considered dead. Mm-hmm. And they would get a little oxygen, and they'd go back out, and they were usually like drug addicts in the street, but it was like, what the hell is going on here? We've never seen this before. They didn't even have COVID.
Do you know what's interesting as well? You were talking about the sunlight, Franklin, and I remember when I was doing several videos and series on graphene and such, and carbon nanotubes years and years back now, that in sunlight, graphene goes through a sort of I believe it's called a photochemical transition or transformation, and basically it degrades. So it forms what's called reduced graphene oxide. And the reason it degrades is when exposed to sunlight is because, of course, the graphene contains, it latches onto oxygen. So these oxygen-containing groups within it, they basically react to that sunlight, and they produce like excited electrons and neutrons. And what it does essentially is degrade the lattice hexagonal structure of graphene. Now, it makes one wonder why Bill Gates and the rest of the billionaires were trying to blot out the sun. And perhaps it has something to do with trying to maintain the integrity of graphene that has been seeded into the environment. Why would they want to do that? Well, if you want to create an almost abyssal matrix that is, is acting as a vehicle for, I don't know, perhaps something that is partly beyond this dimensional realm, that wants to use this, that wants to be born into this world through digital algorithm, that wants everything merged to it in an internet of all things, it being the Lord of all things, thusly, then of course it needs to protect the primary vehicle for the digital terraforming of the planet, which of course is this graphene-like material. So therefore you would have to blot out the sun. Total insanity, but it makes no sense just based on the whole climate change environmentalist mindset. I mean, they're insane, but they're not that insane. But it makes total sense if they're using new digital and, of course, weaponized platforms to attempt to terraform and to merge all bodily systems to a sort of inventory system, a new virtual matrix, a new nature, if you will,
I'm inclined to agree with what you're saying emphatically. We all know that Tesla was working with an electrical grid that can be beamed. Okay, so we know this. We know that they are putting graphene in the atmosphere. We also know that, like you're talking about, while you mentioned it, I Googled this. I never realized this before. But this reduced graphene oxide removes the oxygen functional groups, right? Resulting in a material with properties similar to pristine graphene, including enhanced electrical conductivity, making it useful in various applications.
Yep.
So
because when you have this oxygen process of like rust almost, it's when the electrons or this electric field is actually produced by the reaction there. So that reaction that's happening in the body by introducing is where they're getting the energy from the electrons or the electric field that's being produced that they're eventually going to take for something else if it doesn't kill the person first. I mean, right now they're probably using it just track and trace and things like that.
Well, exactly. But it's sort of this idea that you can generate an electron. Okay, so let's just think for a moment, right? What a quantum computer is and how it works. What if they could create a huge quantum computer in the sky? It's an interesting concept that they could use the quantum field of the sky for using for computation, and like having
define what
particular
you-
compounds that they put in the air.
Define
Sorry,
what
yeah?
you mean by that, by a quantum field in the sky. Like, what do you, what would the, like, what do you consider the quantum field, what the quantum field would be, just so I know?
Well, obviously, quantum computers are basically generated by the processing power of a quantum computer is happening outside of the computer, right? It's happening in the electromagnetic fields.
See, this is
So
something
if you can generate
that's
electromagnetic fields in the sky, interacting
okay.
electromagnetic fields. So if you can have different concentrations of compounds that are graphene based, very similar, monatomic or otherwise, and have different frequencies of UHF, VHF, different frequencies of high voltage running through the sky, you could possibly generate virtual processes in the sky. And the cloud systems could be your processes. Do you see what I'm getting at?
Well, I think we've seen examples of this already being done with radar. Even like they've used radar systems to produce like a kind of spiraling cloud systems that eventually turn into storms and whatnot.
Yeah. Now, what if we can use those storms as computers
Yeah, yeah.
because of the substance in the air and because of the electromagnetic field being stored? So we're generating an electromagnetic in the same way that you can use electromagnetic fields to take apart DNA. This is how they take apart DNA. They've got electromagnetic fields. They don't actually touch the DNA. So if you can do that, then you can create quantum fields of interaction in the sky, which is a gigantic computer that would be a huge quantum computer able to process God knows how much information. And this quantum computer, according to what I've seen about it, seems to suggest that the quantum computing is happening in parallel worlds.
Well,
It's not happening here in a dimensional space that is outside of our dimension. Let's just put it that way. Probably a better way to define it.
Before
Can you affect this dimension?
Before we get to the parallel worlds, the thing you said about the how much data can this store, that's kind of like what's talked about in Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven, this plasma, theoretical plasma science that they're doing, and these Kordylewski clouds that they say might be like an Akashic sort of record. Who knows? But they're saying the amount of energy, they believe that these plasma clouds that are basically invisible in the sky but larger than half of the solar system each would be able to store basically all the events throughout history just within each of them. So it is like an Akashic sort of record type. It's like the cloud. I mean, I think this is the idea of the cloud. You're getting that's what they're basically telling you, that's what they're trying to do. So, I mean, if you think of plasma is used in like these particle accelerators that are supposed to be trying to create 0-point energy. So that would make sense.
So if you generate a quantum computer in the sky that has the profound quantum capacity and the amount of potential to be able to process the information in the Akashic field directly, it's a big jump, but let's say you can. Would you be able to look into time, as in the past and the future? Would you be able to use that as the new upgraded form of Project Looking Glass? Maybe what we saw as Project Looking Glass, right, was them trying to see into the Akashic field and get little whispers of what can come in the future or the past. Maybe they want to generate a big looking glass lens that they can actually influence the future with. Program the future.
Have either of you seen that show Devs, Devs?
No.
Basically, this is what they do in it. It's the guy from Parks and Rec with the mustache. He's like I can't remember what the hell his name is in Parks and Rec, but he's like the really conservative guy in Parks and Rec, the older dude. But he's a computer developer in Silicon Valley and devs, and their devs is short for developers. But devs, I think, is also, if you look back, it's also the name of like a group of either gods or demons in one of the
from
religion.
Hinduism.
Yeah. But they create this sort of machine in which it's almost like literally that Vatican sort of chronovisor looking glass type of idea, where because of all these events in history you have left a signature, they can look back, and then that ability to look back gives them an algorithm that can process potential futures, and then they can get all the potential futures that then are shown to them almost as happening in real time on a screen. So it gives them both predictive power and the power to look into, and it's not just one history they wind up looking into, they wind up looking into multiple histories, just like they wind up looking into multiple futures.
Well, in terms of the whole, I guess you would call it the quantization of the environment, which is what you're mentioning, Franklin. In terms, I mean, the Akashic record, even time and space and perception and the interplay between all of them, that is quantum entanglement. And quantum entanglement, in its very broadest sense, is this idea of if two particles, I mean, they could exist in they could be atomic, they could be, what is below the atomic, I forget now, what quark, gluon, whatever it may be, but they're so profoundly entangled with one another through whatever means that no matter where in space they are, they form almost a connection of some sort with one another. Quantum superposition is basically alchemy. It's literally alchemy. It's the coincidentia oppositorum. It's the union of opposites, which ultimately is, for example, in a very simplistic way, if you were to put a light switch on or off, quantum superposition would state that you could have the light switch in both the states of on and off.
And I will have to say that I think that is nonsense. The superposition thing, I think, is nonsense. But the other thing, I think, is something we have to explore. And because this is something I don't really understand fully, but like, because, Ken Wheeler will be like, quantum entanglement's nonsense because there's no such thing as particles. You're actually seeing wave or perturbations of the ether. Light is a perturbation of the ether. Everything is an ether perturbation, basically, or a disruption, basically. Or
this is why dreams feel tangible to the dreamer, of course, but they're not tangible per se in a particle sense. But like,
so say you have a two electrons that they're saying are in superposition. This is really connected already through the ether. That's why it's in superposition. It's not some sort of magical thing that's happening. It's actually connected through the field. Just wherever the hell it is, it's connected through this etheric field. So when one changes, the other one changes at the same time because it's the same stream of perturbation. So now, does that mean that the science that they have regarding this entanglement is still valid? Or does that mean when they start trying to do this shit on a higher level that affects all of us, they're going to start having a lot of issues because they didn't calculate things correctly? Or do some of them already, I'm sure some of them know the correct way things work and they just don't tell the people below them.
This is how science or scientific discovery has worked since basically the technical alchemists and the development of that, is that they know the process, but they don't know the reason why. So by that, what I mean is they know if they manipulate, the flow of water in a certain way, it will produce either a certain, hydrostatic or hydro effect, whatever it may be. It will produce a certain kinetic force. But they don't really know why it does that, right? So they don't really know even what water is, and they know the ingredients, the recipe, if you will, the chemical recipe of water, the compounds that comprise it, but they don't actually know why all of this. What's the reason for it? Now, of course, one could say, well, that's an open-ended question. How could you know that? But like what you're saying, when you're starting to get into these fields of, say, quantum entanglement, quantum superposition, where you're, and even CERN, where you're attempting to map, I guess, the material and dimensional qualities of existence, obviously, as all technology is, and all scientific discoveries are applied, they're always weaponized. So if you're going to weaponize that, if you're going to use it for the manipulation of the material world, then you have to know every angle of it. It's like what Steiner stated, right, with the mathematical mechanical concepts. And Descartes mentioned a similar thing, that we must measure all of existence, right?
Mhm.
And then we will know God.
Yeah.
But obviously, the problem with that is God is immeasurable. You couldn't even use a metric to measure him. All you're measuring is merely a small slither, a scintilla of the angle of existence. So it's like what Steiner stated, you could take a picture from one side of the tree. It's a true picture of the tree, but it's not a holistic picture. So this is the problem as well. I think this is probably the reason you have these cautionary tales of these precursor civilizations. They just constantly destroy themselves.
Yeah.
Because it's like a tree. A tree will always, every branch will bifurcate from the main stem, right? You could think of these separate branches as civilizations, and they're all trying to take their own pathway that they believe is correct to the sun. But eventually, if it goes on long enough, the tree will end up plateauing out. All of the branches will plateau out if they survive long enough. Because none of them will ever reach the sun. It's like Icarus. You get too close to it, well, it's going to burn you up. It's no longer going to be beneficial to you. So it's the same with the mystery of existence. You have to have that. The mystery has to be somewhat remote for
Right, yeah.
humanity to even function.
That's the biggest issue, is that that idea that nothing should be mysterious. There should be no mystery and everything should be solvable. That's basically like the drive that ends humanity, like you said, every single time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think I
Jump
think
in, man.
that is fundamental here. Like this notion, they're giving us one perspective on everything, the whole reality. And I love the way you put that, what Steiner says about the tree. It's actually the reason why I have reclaimed what I call the metaphysical occult or mystical enneagram, because they've created a particular enneagram for us, which is a side angle shot of the enneagram, and you can see it in the geometry, right? And it was my girlfriend that noticed this. She says, well, the difference between the two enneagrams is that enneagram's like looking at a tree from the side, and the other enneagram's like looking at a tree from the top down. And I think there's something to be said about this, because like everything in our reality is giving us a snapshot from one side, and from one side things look finite, right? When you look at a tree from in front of you, well, when you look at a tree from the top, you're aware of the fact that it just goes on down into the ground in front of you. It's like the roots going down. Yeah, and you're aware of the fact that I'm looking at it now, and while I'm looking at it, it's actually growing downwards, like micro millimeters. I can't see it, but it's actually expanding. And I think that this notion that reality is stuck, that set, it's so foundationally set, like in the building dynamics, like the number 4, right? Pyramids. The reason like why these ancient Egyptians were so fixed on the number 4 was that if you can build a structure that reflects the number 4, you can broadcast the number 4's frequencies out, which is great. Stability, being like organization, plans. I think law falls under the number 4 as well, in the way that it's put out, in the way that it's policed, because number 4 wants to keep you stuck. But you need that stability when you're building a building, because you don't want the foundation moving around. But it can also cause stagnancy. And so I think this whole dynamic of stagnancy has been put onto us. And for example, like getting back to the Enneagram that Gabriel does is amazing because I think it shows us what their plans are. This is how they want us to think. The Enneagram that everybody's using is the one that was created in the 1970s.
Yeah.
So it's a new age.
That's why they use it in like schools, and they use it in businesses, and they use it for everything because it's part of
it's
the
a
whole...
true Enneagram.
Yeah, no,
but
it's very
a side view.
It's an awesome tool with predictive power because you can predict
Predictive
events.
power.
Yeah. But people don't use it. People don't usually use it for predictive power. That's the thing. Gabe does, but no one else is doing it. People use that to like find their own personality type, feeding basically what is part of the machine that is going to eventually control them.
And we can see all aspects of life is reflecting this one-sided facet of view of everything. Like they show us politically, like look from this side. If you look from this side, you can see there's a left and a right. When you look from the top down, you can see they're two branches of the same tree. So from the ground down, you see the left of the tree and the right of the tree. From the roof down, you just see one tree spiraling outwards from the center of the tree, right? And I think that that's sort of like what we're getting at here. And I think that if we can tap into that Akashic field is the Axis Mundi. So the Axis Mundi is the Akashic field. And if you can get into that Akashic field, you can program all parts of the reality. And so I think that this is why they don't want us to be aware that we have this processing power within us to access the Axis Mundi, to access that. Like you were saying earlier about, are we actually programming the weather? You know, to some extent.
Speaking of
Space weather.
Steiner's whole thing was you needed to learn how to, like, during your dream time, access to the Akashic fields. He always would talk about this. He said he claimed to be able to do so himself.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, I don't know how this works. I've never done this. I know it takes a lot of work to get to a point of being able to do something like that. If it's even possible, who knows? I'm sure. I know that Franklin has had some experiences with this, but it's hard to say what the hell to think about it until you actually experience it yourself, you know?
It's as well, I think it was Jung that mentioned that, I've got the quote here, the dream is the small hidden door in the deepest and most intimate sanctum of the soul, which opens to that primeval cosmic night that was soul long before there was conscious ego, and will be soul far beyond what a conscious ego could ever reach. So, but I mean, they talk about virtual reality too. See, even this idea of the tree, and getting back to graphene, the graphene is black. It's the first stage of the great work, which is the Negredo, yeah. So it's I think you mentioned as well, the substantia nigra, which is literally the black substance of the brain, right? In Latin. So it's similar to this idea of the void or the abyss, this notion that the tree in its material seed emerges from the abyss. It emerges from the unconscious. Now, of course, as well, that's juxtaposed to that which is beyond the black sun or the abyssal sun, under the ground, which grows that seed. That's juxtaposed to the actual sun that we see within the manifestable and conscious world. I mean, this is the same distinction between Saturn and the sun, essentially, that you see throughout alchemy. You see it as well on the Enneagram. So if you look at the Enneagram, you have the triangle, which is 3, 6, 9. And then you have the other two hemispheres, which of course all add up to 3, 6, and 9 as well. One is almost you could say it's almost like the hexagram in a sense. It's if the 3, 6, and 9s are triangles, then the two triangles are intertwined, almost again in that coincidentia oppositorum. But as well within the Enneagram, you see the two hemispheres. I'm looking at a different Enneagram, but we'll talk about that one as well.
This one has got 369 programmed into it on one triangle, and all three triangles represent 369. So it's the macrocosm of the 369 as it's reflected through the 6 of the 369 and the 9 of the 369. Everything. And if you encode this in a different way, it spells 666. If you use the Kabbalistic three trigrams. But yeah, can continue, brother.
Yeah, the one I'm using is the one, I think it occurs in Tesla's work, if I recall correctly. I might be wrong there, but it shows that the 8, the 7, the 1, the 2, and 3 and 4. They are all, pardon me, no, just 4 and 5. Sorry. They form almost like a right and left hemisphere, like what you would see on the brain, or even they look like two wings as well. So you have this triangular protrusion out of the center at the top, out of the sides as well. It's almost similar to what you see within the heptagram, the alchemical heptagram, where you'll see, you'll usually see it flipped upside down, but it says corpus, spiritus, and animus. So basically, it's the soul, the spirit, and the body, or the mind, the spirit, and the body. So it's the same concept with that. But it's interesting the way that the Enneagram puts it. The one I'm talking about, at least. But that's very
yeah,
similar.
you can see. If you see there's a man standing there, can you see the left foot of the man that's facing us is touching 4? The right foot of the man that's facing us is touching 5. The right hand stretched out is touching the mystic 7. The left hand stretched out is touching the mystic 2, and his head is touching the activist, number 9. So you can see that this is a man oriented, yeah. And if you were to stand up and spread your arms out, that's exactly how you're going to look. Hence, from tip to tip, the height and the dimensions of your man. So this is actually what a real man standing up looks like with his arms spread out. So if you see someone in a wingsuit, this is the shape of a wingsuit, right? The reason this is the shape of a wingsuit is because that's what you look like with your arms spread out. So literally here you have an actual orientation of a human being standing up with their arms spread out like a cross. And so you can see the left side and the right side. With this Enneagram, I was able to actually show how the seal of Saturn was constructed. And the seal of the Saturn reflects the mathematics in this Enneagram perfectly, because the seal of the Saturn is constructed out of a Vedic Enneagram. And a Vedic Enneagram is a seal of Saturn. If you see an astrological chart of the Vedas, it's 9 blocks. And the way those 9 blocks are aligned relate to the number 4 being the end of a cycle, which I've explained in a video on my channel, how this is the day and how this is the night, and how this leads towards stagnancy from activity, and how this leads from stagnancy towards activity, with Mercury being the transformative potential that starts the activity. So this is reflecting the occult principles of the Enneagram as per the Vedic numerology, the Taoist numerology, the Kabbalistic numerology, the Chaldean numerology, and the Chaldean astrology, which is essentially very similar in its archetypal structure to the Vedic astrology and to what we consider Western astrology. The only difference being the Vedic astrology, when they map it out from the moon as opposed to from the sun, which is what the Western astrology tends to do. Other than that, it's all exactly the same. So when you take those occult principles here, and obviously you need to have Mercury here, because Mercury represents the beginning of change, which is why in alchemy, Mercury is that key mutator, and 4 represents the stability of the north node of the moon, and which is why the number 4 relates to the north node of the moon and also to Uranus, which is interesting. And so in a sense, you could say that it's you see it's connected to the sun. If you go to India or anywhere really, and you see the number of the sun, they'll say it's 1, and 4 relates to solar numbers, but you'll notice that 4 relates specifically to Uranus and to the north node of the moon. So when they map out your astrological chart on their square of Saturn in India, because that's how it's done, all of these principles have to be reflected. And obviously the 7 relates to the moon, So 7 and 2 are often numbers associated with the moon. However, when you look at it, the 7 represents the south node of the moon and Neptune. So there's this line running between 4 and 7, which you can see here on the seal of Saturn. If you look at the seal of Saturn, it's actually seal of Saturn. You'll see what I'm talking about specifically. Maybe I can find an image that reflects this. It will give us like a really great insight. So then you can understand what you're talking about here is actually encoded in this mystical seal of the Saturn, and this is how they created the seal of the Saturn. And you can decode why the seal of the Saturn is the way it is based upon this this mathematics, which comes from not new psychologist ideas, but this is really all I've done is I've taken the astrological Vedic Enneagram and I've turned it into an image. That's all I've done. I've not done anything new. I've taken the age-old ancient knowledge and I've put it into a context here so that it's able to be sort of able to be seen as a picture reflecting. So this is looking at the tree from the sky down. And so all of these principles, actually, these are the 9 Sephirot of the Kabbalah. And Kether represents the spiraling notion between the 0 and what begins a new cycle of 1. And these 18 are the paths of the tree of life. And this represents the Resh, not the Resh, the Shin, which is one of the mother letters. This represents the Maim, which is one of the mother letters. And this represents the life force, the prana, the Aleph, which is one of the mother letters. So this encodes all of the tree of life. This is the tree of life as seen from the roof down. So I never liked the way they presented the tree of life in the Jewish system or the way they presented it in the Kabbalistic, Western Kabbalistic system. I always found like it seemed like it was like I'm looking at the tree from the side. Why are we not looking at the tree from the top down? So the seal of Saturn gives us that insight, and when we understand how the seal of Saturn was created, like the mechanisms behind the creation of the seal of Saturn, then it sort of gives us like a powerful insight into. Let me just get a bigger image of the seal of Saturn, which I think will be quite useful.
It's interesting as well. With the Kabbalistic Sephiroth, just really quickly, with the Kabbalistic Sephiroth, that seems to derive from Babylonian sources. Now, of course, obviously with the Exodus, the first Exodus in Babylon, they probably picked up a lot of that, and it became incorporated into Abrahamism and its mystical offshoot. But interestingly, there's a God, I forget the book now. It's a non-Jewish commentator on the occult and Kabbalah, and he actually creates a 3-dimensional Sephiroth, and it looks uncannily like an egg. So you have this same concept you see in alchemy with the child of the egg, or of course the Orphic tradition, the Orphic egg as well. And this all relates back to the world egg. Of course, even the papal crown, one of the papal crowns, looks like an egg that's wrapped 4 times as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And it's interesting, when we look at this Kabbalistic notion, that the let me make this so that it's not too big. Well, you can see the seal of Saturn right there, I think, quite well in the colored form. The tree of life and the Kabbalah. So the Kabbalah is way older than Judaism. It goes right back to pre times. Just Judaism gave a particular version of the Kabbalah. In the Arabic world, they've got something called the Qibla. Now, the Qibla, if you try and find out, like exoterically, it means facing Mecca. But if you spend time with a master of the law, and they probably won't normally open up to you. But I mean, I was lucky because I was living in an ashram, and every morning I would go into meditation and I would be telepathically connected to this man who was in his mosque singing up in his little tunnel at the top. When he was in a trance, I was in a trance. And so we were telepathically connected. And this would happen every morning when I was in meditation. I was like, who's this guy I keep seeing, like we're sitting in front of each other, staring into each other's eyes. And then I met the guy in a chai shop. Turned out he was an imam. I was like, oh my gosh. So we started connecting, and I started explaining to him, and he was like, so like, where did you get, what are you doing? Where's your knowledge come from? And I explained to him that I was initiated into the Kabbalah. This was like 2001. And that I'd been practicing for like, a decade, for more than a decade. And so this was just my practice. And he started saying, this is interesting. And so I started drawing pictures on the ground, sigils and things. And he was like, oh, wow. And he said to me, this is part of his practice. I said, what do you mean this is part of your practice? He said, we call it Kabbalah. Now, he couldn't speak much English. At that time, my Hindi was limited, but I had somebody who could translate for me. And they were a bit confused about the conversation because they couldn't understand what we were talking about. Well, we could understand what we were talking about based upon the pictures and the translations. And so what he shared with me was like, I was like mind blown. I was like, holy crap, this is a different version of the Kabbalah. And he was saying that this Kabbalah is older than, this comes from before Muhammad. This is older than. And I was like, wow, okay, that's interesting. And he was saying it's very ancient, and that this is why they face Mecca. It's got to do with this cube, and that this Saturn cube is the key to everything. If you want to unlock everything in the universe, Saturn's cube is the business. So this is the number squares of Saturn, and this is how they've constructed it. Now, if you look at this image, you'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about, hopefully. So if you look at this one for a moment, you'll notice that I say that the activism is at 9, right? At 9 is the point of powerful transition, and 5 is a point of powerful transition, right? So when we look at 9 and 5, so just remember how important 9 and 5 are when you look at this, because you'll see something very interesting when you look at this cube here. So you'll see here we have in the center number 5, right? And here we have 6, and here we have 4, and here we have 9. So 9 is starting off this cycle, right? And this cycle obviously is fundamentally important because it represents, if you look at it really carefully, it represents this powerful 9, 8, and 1. And this has got to do with the energetic manipulations of the will. And so 6 and 4 are connected in a line because they run through Mercury. This is what separates day from night, right? What separates day from night, the seasons, is the 6-4 division, which is why the hexagram is so important, why the 4 was so important to the Egyptians, why the 5 is so important to alchemy. Those 3 are fundamental factors. And so when you really look at what's going on here, you'll see that there's this structure of 2 sitting on the balance here, and 2 is related to 1, 2, and 3. So 1, 2, and 3 are, as I was explaining on this Enneagram, where you have the decline of energy. So you have high activity, activist, and you still got high activity. You got less activity. You got activity becoming less. It's that mutable fire which is fading. And 4, you got stagnancy. 4 represents being stuck but stable but stagnant. 5 begins the new cycle, sort of sitting with 9 in the new cycle, 5 and 9. But it separates 6 from 4. So 4 to 6 becomes the point of the ending of one cycle and the beginning of another cycle. And then we have 7, 8, and 9 building the rest of the other side of the polarity, which we can see when we look at this being depicted here. So then you see how 7, 8, and 9 represents the ascendancy of energy becoming more active, because 5 has reactivated the 4 that's stagnant, which is represented here as being separated from 4 to 6. So here you can learn to actually see how you have to draw this, right? You draw it like this. You start with 1, you go to 2, right? You go to 3. You then go to 4, which goes through 5 to 6, right? You then go to 7, which then goes to 8, and then ends in 9. Can you see the way that this is drawn? This is the enneagram being depicted here. And this needs to be reflected in the mathematics of the process of 9 becoming 1, becoming 2, becoming 3. So 4 has to represent stagnancy. If 4 doesn't represent stagnancy, and it doesn't represent, here's 4 here. So 1, 2, 3, 4 has to represent stagnancy, and the builder is about being square, organized, planning, and having control over everything, but there's no adaptability in 4. 5 reinvigorates the squareness of 4 to give it movement, and 6 becomes the generator of that movement to become the fulfillment of the maximum movement in 9, which is why it is this way. Yeah, brother.
I think that's like, I think we discussed this last time we did the live stream. I think I might have brought this up when you were mentioning this, because I agreed with what you were saying about the 4. And then I was like, that's also reflected in the Japanese and Chinese cultures, where 4 equals death or 4 equals time. And when you get this idea of 4 being time, or 4 being death, or 4 being like the still point in between, like that still point of between the magnetic and the whole dielectric, when it's still, which is a phase of death, basically, because you're not in motion, and it's kind of the center point of that. So that's also a point, like this would be a metaphorical point that kind of connects to what you're saying about foundational. It's a foundational stillness that's needed to then build on.
Yeah, in the Kabbalah, it represents the mazlot. And the mazlot represents the wheel, the macrocosm. And the macrocosm is set, it's fixed, it's stuck. But the microcosm invigorates the macrocosm to give it movement. Mm-hmm. And from our perspective. And so here you can see the 4 represents matter, and the 6 represents transcending matter as a polarity. So the 6 is obviously related to the Merkaba. So the Merkaba is really how you learn to transcend matter. Yeah? Without activating the Merkabic forces within the consciousness field, you're not able to leave the physical body. This is like core shamanism, really essential. And the way in which you reinvigorate those energies is by using the 4th principle of Hermes, right? And if you look at what the 5th principle of Hermes, and if you look at what the 5th principle of Hermes represents, then you'll get an idea here. And hopefully this will pop up here. So here, if you can see how I've represented the 5th principle of Hermes. In fact, I've got all 7 principles here. And here you see the Enneagram once again reflected. I don't know if you can see it. But if you look there, you see that we've got rhythm. And rhythm relates to will, right? And so we've got mentalism, we've got correspondence, we've got vibration. Vibration is memory. So the vibe of a place is how you remember it, right? You remember things emotionally. This is interesting. You become emotional, you won't be able to remember things. Keep your mind clear and observe your emotions objectively, and you can remember. Imagination is like that space of being generated by the ability to create an image. An image needs somewhere to exist. That's the imagination. Then we've got the principle of rhythm here. Now notice these two, memory and will, are bisecting both the causal energetic body, the astral energetic body, and the etheric energetic body. So we've got this interaction here. So you could say that will and memory have 2 places. They exist in this sphere and they exist in this sphere, right? While existing in this sphere. So you've got the 3 different elements of 3, 6, 9 being reflected by these interaction of these two potentials, which is vibration becoming rhythm. Now, rhythm is the principle of Saturn, which is why it's related to. I relate it to the to the principle of what you're eating, like 8. I ate breakfast this morning. That 8 was the number 8, Saturn's number, so it relates to digestion. And
Isn't the fourth
food builds the
rule?
bones.
Isn't the fourth rule of the fourth Hermetic principle polarity?
Yes, the fourth principle is polarity, and that is imagination. And the fifth principle is rhythm.
But I
And
think
so the rhythm
I
you can
think
see as
seeing-
linked with vibration.
And I
Yeah.
think if you look at the fourth, actually, though, you could also see where I know Silas has spoken a lot about this, and I agree with a lot of what he's saying. This where you can see the Kabbalah has been twisted, like probably around this principle, and then around this number 6, and everyone's been given a sort of distorted version that's gone through many religious lenses, because you have these polarity of opposites, and then it becomes like order out of chaos, and then you have that sort of thing that's happening, and then you have the 666, which has been turned into something that it might be totally different, considering who knows. We don't really have an answer for what this is. We have many interpretations, but I mean, it could also mean a descent into matter further than we already are, and it seems like that's kind of what it does mean, at least to modern occultists who have twisted the original teachings. And their transcendence relies on the transhumanist aspect of keeping their body basically alive forever. God be damned with the consciousness. I don't think they even care about the consciousness as much, as long as they can clone it, copy and paste it at this point.
You mentioned that transhumanity, and I'm hearing transgender from my unconscious while you're talking, and I think there's this powerful connection with
Huge
what's going on
connection.
here.
Huge connection.
They want our imagination to govern how we feel about gender. So what they're doing here is they're switching over, and it's very interesting to look at the energetics behind this. This is part of their mission, right? They want to confuse these two principles, the seventh principle and the fourth principle, right? So generation has got to do with your ability to generate sex, right? Masculine and feminine. It's really defined by like your generative progeneration potential, right? So gender, the principle of gender. So they have taken the principle of gender and they're trying to switch the principle of gender with the principle of imagination. Isn't that an interesting concept? If you look at the psychological implications, is got to do with bringing that principle of as above, so below. They want to bring it onto the physical planet and change the generation, which means that generation will be replaced by it, which means generation, the ability to have babies will go away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this was something that before I'd even met you, frankly, me and Silas would talk about how like the Thelemites seem to have distorted this in a way where they took these alchemical traditions that taught that you needed to integrate your divine feminine in a psychological way and in like the way you manifest your actions physically, but it wasn't in a way where you had to physically mutilate or change your body to change this your gender or your sex. Like that wasn't supposed to be what this all was supposed to be about. This was a spiritual integration of masculine and feminine, so you actually acted correctly and you became a better person who was balanced. And it became, through a lot of the, I think, more left-hand path teachings, a transgender sort of ideology, which has been around a long time, especially in a lot of the elite sort of cults that would spring up and then be destroyed and spring up and be destroyed.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. Look, like Aleister Crowley, I think epitomizes this. Now, it's really interesting that the particular two cards that were switched, right? one of them being justice and the other one being strength. I want us to understand the implications of this. For those of you that haven't seen it, if you go and watch the last video I uploaded, there's a 90-minute video where I run through the whole major arcana, but I don't run through it unit by unit like people normally do. I'm showing you the journey of the Fool as an organic process, as they are like sort of extensions of our personality and our consciousness, rather than giving segment by segment, because I think when you look at segment by segment, you can misconstrue what the bigger picture is. And when you look at it in this way, you'll see the most important card is Libra's card, right? And that is justice. The reason is when you split the major arcana in two, okay, so as I show here in this particular Enneagram, I show the polarities of positive and negative in the Sephirot, right? So the 1, 2, 3, 4 has a particular charge. The 6, 7, 8, 9 has a particular charge. 5 is the hermaphrodite sitting between the two. So this is what separates the polarity from one to the other, effectively. Now, I run through the major arcana to show how this principle is reflected both in the microcosm, because that's a macrocosmic image that we're sending. And when I'm showing you this image, this is the macrocosm. It's really important to understand the difference. The paths that connect these different elements are effectively the microcosmic effects on these 10 principalities or powers, as well as the 3 mother letters having a broad sphere of effect on our consciousnness, which is represented by the circle, the enneagon, and the enneagram. The enneagon being the pentagram, heptagram, hexagram, those are stars. Enneagram is a star. Pentagon, that's the thing that goes around the outside. So enneagon is that form of the what's here depicted as orange. Mm-hmm. The enneagram is the blue, and the circle that connects all of these things. And I've done another version of this where I depict it in the 3 colors, so that you've got the yellow, the red, and the blue, so to understand the 3 primary colors and the relevance of why we have computers that use RBG, because we're reflecting cosmic principles, fundamental principles, which are fundamental to the Kabbalah and fundamental to Taoism and fundamental to Vedic cosmology of Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, and Aum Tat Sat, and within the Aum, the Aum, and you go and you look at the Kabbalah and you see the Or and the Ein Sof, and the Ein Sof Or, which comes from the Ein, which is negative substance, and the full potential unscalability or unmeasurableness of the infinite potential of that, which is reflected in the Vedic cosmology, which is reflected in the yin, the yang, and the Tao. The Tao composing this principle. And so these are all reflected macrocosmically, microcosmically, and the interaction and the dials between the microcosm and the macrocosm. So when you look at the inner process of the journey of the Fool, you've got 21 steps. You've got 10 steps of one polarity, which is the actual. I call it the serpent is a passive process, and the sword or the lightning bolt of Zeus or Odin, or whichever tradition you're coming from, is the active process of stability. So it's the not active process of activities. The serpent is the active process of things that are stable. So they restabilize. So the serpent is in a state of movement, right, up the tree, and the lightning bolt is just there. It's just keeping the space, as it were. So when you look at the serpent, which represents the 22 major arcana, if you look at for example, when we're looking at the medical emblem of Hermes' rod, we're looking at the serpent, because Hermes is number 5, represents that point between, as you can see here, between the rest of 4 and the new invigoration of 6, which is the Merkaba, which you're going to travel through the mystic realms with, and you're going to find that stabilized balance between spiritual and matter, represented by the powerful forces of 8, as we've seen reflected in this thing here. 8 represents the stabilized spiritual balances between this, and it has to do with 6 transcending 4 as a polarity. Obviously, 5 is the key to the whole story, so the pentagram is central to understanding this math. But when we look at this and we look at the process, we see Libra is the pivot. So Libra represents Lamet, that's an ox goad, that's what controls life force. So when you switch Libra around, it's very important what Aleister Crowley does. If you understand like the fundamental archetypal language of what the Kabbalah is trying to express, you can see that he's doing something which is particularly dangerous, right? He's taking the principle of number 1, right? Number 1 here, which is Leo. Leo, strength. Strength represents the lion, represents Leo. It's in the card, right? And 1 is the sun that rules strength. So when you are doing this, you are switching the active part of Venus, number 6, right? Now 6 is the Merkaba. 6 is Venus rules over Taurus, the tauric field, right? That tauric energetic field. Hence, the tauric field is a stable thing. It's not a process, right? It's just there. It's stagnant in a sense. And then 6 is the active side of Venus, which is scales, which are constantly in motion. So the reason why Libra has got these scales, meaning that this constant motion, is because Libra kicks off the new dynamic of motion. So this is the Merkaba, right? The gateway to the mysteries is the title of Venus, because art is ruled by Venus, and art is how you gauge and look at your inner self, and how your inner self communicates with you is through art. And that art, when you start to understand the language of the unconscious as it's reflecting art, music, paintings, stuff, that's when you start to progress to the mystic, where the mystic is now starting to understand what the art means, right? And the mystic being able to understand what the art means brings a context of understanding the physical and the spiritual. And then number 8 is able to take these spiritual forces that you've learned and turn them into activity that can produce success, money, fame. You can go places in the world with 8, because 8 is going to bring you the success that you're looking for, the luckiest number in Taoism for that reason. But we see Saturn as representing like the cube, and then 9 being Mars is the activity of all of this processes. So Mars is obviously the key, as it rules the head, as it's the fundamental starter of the next wheel. So Aries, starting the next wheel, kicks us into the next cycle of the day becoming stagnant, which needs to revolve around this. So when you disempower 6, and you disempower 6's active side, which is the scales, you are taking away from the chariot. This is really fundamentally important to understand. And that chariot, which is effectively the Merkaba, that's how you travel into the spiritual realm. So what Crowley has done is he's ensured that anyone who uses his system the way he set it out, that their Merkabic forces will not be correctly aligned, because he's put it's like buying a car and then putting a limiter in it. Can't go faster than 20 miles an hour, right? But it's got the capacity to go like 180 miles an hour, but they put that limiter in it. That's what Crowley has done. And it's not by accident. Anybody who understands this, really like has looked into like the real symbolism behind it, will see it. And it's reflected in the Saturnian square and in this Kabbalah. So the Kabbalistic reflection of the Enneagram, which also reflects the Taoist notions. Because to understand the Taoist notions of why 8 is so important is to understand its progression from the mystic. And the mystic is really about that expansiveness inside, understanding the spiritual laws. And I think that they don't want us to understand the spiritual laws, which is why they want to put graphene into our brains to tie this in, because the graphene is going to muddle up our pineal gland. And when you muddle up your pineal gland, you mess up your solar activity, because then the solar activity of the retina and the pineal gland that generates all of the melatonin to keep you in your proper diurnal circles, and that works closely with the dopamine in order to regulate serotonin, you're going to become depressed, despondent, not want to get out of bed. You're going to want to sit down on your couch like a couch potato. You're going to want to watch TV all day long. You're not going to want to do anything. You're going to be lazy. If you don't have to work, you wouldn't work. You would want to, if the government offers you money, it's like, yeah, I'll sit at home, watch TV, give me money. And so we saw this all happening, didn't we? This
Oh
whole
yeah,
COVID
yeah,
story.
absolutely. I mean, even to just quickly tie sort of the alchemical principles to, I guess you would call it transgenderism, or also transhumanism, as a nascent stage of that. If you look at the Splendor Solace Plate 15, which is that very famous one that depicts the two fountains. One on the right is Mercury, and the other one is either of a sort of a gold substance, or it's like what we see, I believe, in Plate 10, which is almost like a lake of waste or putrescence. One is basically the aqua permens, is, the permanent water, and the other is the sort of fluid mercurial water. I forget what the Latin is for it now, but it's interesting because those are actually sort of wash basins, medieval wash basins. Now, of course, you're seeing in that the duality becoming one through the knight. And the knight has this armor on because what he is engaging in is dangerous, it's violent, hence why he has the falchion or the scimitar as well. And of course, the red sulfuric or solar shield. But with transgenderism, the whole thing was based around the bathroom. What bathrooms do we use? So you have all of these almost psycho-spiritual, symbolic notions of waste, of purity, impurity, of washing oneself. I believe the Latin alchemical term is ablatio, to literally wash away the impurities. So all of that's tied in. I mean, it shows a base, like what you're stating, Franklin. It shows a basis that the ritualism we're seeing perhaps is effective on a subconscious level, of course, but consciously, the elite or the ruling class, the writers of this ritualistic ritualistic stage performance, are very much inclined to that thinking. They're very much inclined along those ritualistic lines. They're harkening back to something as well. Regarding what you said regarding Crowley and this inversion of the Venus of the sex, the female, he of course has the Scarlet Woman. I believe she's called Babylon with an A instead of the Y. So again, the same idea as the Gate of the Gods, which is what Babel means. But she is linked to chaos, she's linked to limitation. She almost has a very Saturnine aspect to it. I think this probably ties in with the Saturn moon matrix, that notion as well. Because within alchemy, and you could say everything that's branched off from Kabbalah, at least in a materialistic sense, it really views the feminine as a limiting principle, as a principle of limitation. And it views the womb as almost like the Platonic cave, that it's not a place where life is born, but where purgatory is sown. So again, there may be truth to that, but it's just interesting to see the distinctions. You know, there seems to be almost a flip that has occurred. One should view the Merkava as a spiritual or a psycho-spiritual concept, but in the modern day, it's almost become an actual an intrinsic, like what they call progress, right? It's the momentum of something. It's the momentum towards something, even if that be the precipice. I think it was Yuval Noah Harari mentioned in his book. I think it was either Homo Deus or 21. No, it was Homo Deus. And he says, listen, we will have immortality. We will have transcendence biodigitally. And we will emerge as gods, even if it kills us. So you've got this sort of strange crusade, you know?
Well, I think you're tapping into exactly what I wanted to bring up about this, and this might be where this possibly could differ from past cycles of sort of this sort of gender fluidity that pops up in former cultures, but maybe it doesn't differ because who knows, we could have had technically advanced civilizations in the past. It seems like we definitely had them at some points, but some other points maybe not. It was more like just a more natural thing that happened, and cults formed, cults were destroyed, et cetera, et cetera. But right now, what the transgender thing does, what this whole, even if you're not an intersex person, you're going to be exposed to it. It's going to be like a cultural sort of form of MK Ultra, inducing a state of mind control in which your identity is basically gone and you are erased and given an altar. And sometimes you're given multiple altars. And some of these kids even say that they have multiple altars, and one of these altars will be like an animal, and the other altar will be an avatar. It won't even be a human. It'll be like a divine entity. And that's straight out of MK Ultra. That's straight out of things like the sort of programming that happens in the higher levels of Scientology. And it's not good. But you can see that the kids who are affected by this are now working on the transhumanist agenda. And why? Because those who had gotten the surgeries and who were MK Ultra'd into loving their slavery and loving their captors and loving the programming that they were getting, or just tricked into they were too young to know any different, now they're stuck with bodies that are literally falling apart way before they should be. And the only way out of that is if they can find a way to program immortality, basically. So they're worshiping the AI God now because that's their only hope of surviving. And I think that's kind of like what we have to realize we're up against at this point.
Well, this is the great filter as well. And you even see George Bataille writing something similar to this. I forget the concept or the term that he ascribed to it, but essentially, industrialized societies will always destroy themselves. Because ultimately, I think it was like that old Native American motto, you know, what will you do when the earth cries out, I have no more to give? And you see this at the beginning of Mel Gibson's very prophetic movie Apocalypto, where the elder is teaching this sort of moral through a story. And I forget how the story goes, but I think it's the man that cries out in pain, you know, because, you know, he has this sort of insatiable or voracious appetite. He wants more and more and more and more, incessant greed. And, you know, the other animals in the jungle try to placate him, appease him, but it's never enough for him. And this ties in with the concept, it's actually quite a Bataillean concept of the sun, that the way these people view the sun is not how we would view the sun, which is, you know, similar to the sort of pineal gland or the cosmic ascendance, right? You're ascending to a psycho-spiritual or psychic a new modality. They view it that the sun is this sacrificial thing, right? Because they view everything from the bottom up, from the abyss up, rather from God down, or whatever term we want to call it. So they view everything from the prima materia, not the prima causa. So because of that, they get stuck into this this modality where they see the sun as a sacrificial thing. That you sacrifice the sun, you, like Nietzsche, you kill God, in a quite a literal sense. You destroy nature because what you must do as something that is created is you must leap from the canvas to steal the paintbrush from the creator, rather than living in accordance with the creator. You even see this with alchemy and Thelema. This idea that love, love is the law, love under will. But the modern concept of love within, I guess you would call it these, very dark occult circles, is that love is something to do with a material union rather than a psychic union with God, a theosis, an attempt, a very genuine attempt to find God or to find the prima causa, to find that hidden essence within the matter. What they're seeking to do is to almost find that hidden essence, to materialize or manifest it, and then to shackle it so that they can draw ever greater, degrees of power. Yeah, sorry, man.
I think he was going to say, and then to use it to basically manifest whatever they desire, almost create their own god from it, but I'm not positive.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's this concept as well, like Roko's basilisk, that thought experiment, and there's other things in the Zohar too.
What happened?
It seems to point
Can you hear
to...
me, Franklin?
Yeah, we can hear you, yeah.
You can't hear Silas, all right?
I can hear everybody.
Fuck. Maybe it's me.
Silas, can you speak again?
Am I interrupting Silas? Is he talking right now?
Yep.
Shit. All right, let me pop out and I'll pop back in. My bad.
That's strange. I could hear you perfectly.
We've been attacked by the demiurge.
But carry on, Silas. You were saying, brother. Don't be derailed.
Yeah, I was just going to finish the point actually. It's it's basically this. It's this complete and utter reversal, I guess, of the spiritual journey, and you could say it's entwined as well in the notion of knowledge as power. Again, knowledge is that thing which is constantly seeking to be manifested, but can never truly be manifested because true knowledge only exists with the divine. But the idea that they are constantly seeking to reiterate through technology, through artificial means, is that knowledge can be manifested, that it can be drawn upon as a source of power. Now, of course, this is the folly of the entire thing, the fool's journey, is that, like what we were stating, they can manipulate that knowledge, but they can't truly know of the knowledge. They can't truly know every facet of it, like what Steiner stated. They don't know it in its holistic sense. So inevitably what they always do is it backfires upon them because they misuse it. And you'll find that with humanity. And this is why industrial societies destroy themselves, typically, is because, and this great filter, is because while we technologically advance, our spiritual advancement doesn't occur concomitantly. So we're in this constant lag state spiritually, where and you can actually see this in industrialized societies, where we have this very massified view of everything. Human beings are seen as a mass rather than individuals with intrinsic worth and fractal expressions of the divine. Which, of course, if you had that, it would permit the technologies, rather than being weaponized against people, they could be used for the betterment of people. But again, because of that lag between that inverse between spiritual development and technological development, you never really find that in these industrialized societies.
I find it very interesting when you're talking about the reversal. I just want to point out, Chris, I'll just be a second.
I just wanted to say I'm sorry for interrupting before I lost sound and I thought Silas knocked out, but it was me who knocked out. My bad, buddy. Sorry about that, dude.
No, it's all good, brother. It happens, man. But I won't be long. So here we see this idea of this 456654 line, right, representing the slicing between the the 1, 2, 3, and the 4. One, two, no, sorry, not the 4. What am I saying? And the 7, 8, 9. So the 7, 8, 9 line, which I represent as the inner journey, journeying inwards more, and the other one representing the more journeying outwards, the 1, 2, 3, right? Expansiveness, which in the expansion finds its like maximum in Jupiter, right? And which is an interesting concept because that's reaching to 4. So 4 is stagnant, and 6 is where we journey inwards. This is where the harmony begins. This is where we start that Merkaba spiritual awakening of the light body. 5 is that central. It's almost like they want to keep us stuck in a 4, 5, 6 line, when actually the 6, 5, 4 line, 4 represents everything that you can know, that you have known, like the geometry of sacred geometry of the building, how to build a building. This is 4. Like if you want to know how to build a structure, think of the Masons, think of ancient Egypt, think of the pyramids. 4 is how all of the information is encoded, right? And 5 is what you need to decode the information to make it active, and 6 is how you put that into practice. So if you've got everything stuck on 4 and it's moving towards 6, then 6 is like a lost part in the thunderstorm. 6 is supposed to be moving towards 4 in the same time that 4 is moving towards 6, because then the Merkabic consciousness is focused towards knowledge. 4 represents the Muladhara chakra in Vedic cosmology, just to take it that side. It represents Parabrahm with the 4 faces facing in the 4 directions. Represents the anus, represents the analysis, right? The anal Isis. Why does 4 represent the anal Isis? Well, when we look here, we see the anal Isis. So 4 has got a direct route looking at Isis, number 2. So 4 has got the special relationship with 2 because 2 compounds into 4. Whether you multiply it by 2 or whether you add it to itself, it comes back to 4. So 4 and 2 have got this very, very important relationship of polarizing. So here you can see why they need to reverse it. They need to reverse it because they want to block us from becoming aware of 4's relationship with 2. And in order for you to understand the relationship between 4 and 2, 5 has got to be active. And for 5 to be active, 6 has got to be acting out the activity of 5. So if you're starting at 4 and you're going to 6, then 6 is the resting point. 6 is supposed to be the point where the big action begins, and 4 is supposed to be the point where the action ends. So the correct line of 4 should be 6, 5, 4, not 4, 5, 6. So when they reverse the 6, 5, 4, which is that movement of the Merkaba towards knowledge and understanding the structure of the universe, and analysis, which takes us back to the number 2, which is Isis. And once we go back to the number 2, which is Isis, what does Isis have? Isis has a very important point here. It acts as a point of an anchor and a transition between these 2 particular forces, which I think sort of represents a very fundamental activity in the world. The way that the Sun and Jupiter support Isis, support knowledge. Jupiter is always the philosophers, Sagittarius and such, right? Aquarius, Pisces, the emotional journey of understanding the archetypes. So you're always looking at Jupiter to do with philosophy, expansiveness of mind, and the Sun as if that rational ability, the rational power of the light, enlightenment, is to do with the Sun's energy. So when you look at 2, Isis holds a very important role as like the harbinger of the moon. And so you're cutting yourself off from the forces of 2 if you aren't aware of this. And when you cut yourself off from the forces of 2, you become stuck on the pivot of 8. And when you're stuck on the pivot of 8, then you've got a little bit of a serious problem, because then what you find will happen that instead of your 7, 8, and 9 becoming a paradigm where the idealism of 9 moves through the dynamism of 8 to become the enlightenment, or that inner revelation of 7, the mystic. So instead of you going on a journey which takes the Mars's dynamic energy and puts it into Saturn in such a way that Saturn uses the hard work or to become a disciple, and the disciple then takes you to the point of 7 where you're able to look within yourself and reveal all of the deeper inner mysteries that 6 holds. Hence 6 and 7 are next to each other, right? Because on the Enneagram 6 and 7 have to be. So this is why this relationship between Neptune and Venus is so poignant when it comes to this inner reality. So I think that this is what they're doing. They're reversing this flow of energy. They're forcing us to go 4, 5, 6 instead of 6, 5, 4. And I want to point out one other thing. We used to write from right to left, right? Now we write from left to right. Isn't that interesting? So starting at the top, the left is going in the right direction. They've even reversed the way we write. Well, what do you think about that? Like, to the point where they've reversed just about everything that we have.
Oh, well, exactly like what you see with, of course, all sigils really do this. This is why, of course, sigils look very much like, almost like circuits, right? It's a way to modulate, I guess you would say, to quantize the informational flow, which obviously affects our perception, and our perception affects the world around us. So these geometric expressions and representations are very much utilizing what Steiner warned about, which are mathematical, mechanical concepts that manipulate our view of the world, or perhaps, of course, manipulate our view of the world by limiting our view of the world. Of course, Saturn is very much linked to limitation too, it being associated with Bina, which is the feminine of the top 3 of the Sephira on the Sephirot. Another thing to mention as well is that the sigil of Saturn, it links to the unicursal hexagram of the Lima, but it also links as well to the magic square of Masonry, because if you, of course, add up all of the columns and the rows of that magic square, it comes to 15. Of course, 15 is the number of the devil, which isn't necessarily, it's not an inherently evil number. It's just another part of the psychic process, I guess you could call it the magnum opus to the fool's journey. But it's also linked, I believe, of course the order's 3, and if you sum all of those numbers up to 9 and then divide it by obviously 9 itself, so it comes to 45 all summed up. Divide by 9 is 5, so the average is 5. Hence why 5 is in the center too. The numerical signatures alone are quite interesting because you see it throughout Masonry. I believe it's also found in Rosicrucianism as well, if I recall correctly. That same magic square, along with a very slight, it almost looks like a unicursal hexagram, and I forget the sigil's name now, but it looks like the unicursal Thelamite logo and also the sigil of Saturn,
which I'm sharing right now. Actually, if you put the screen up, that's Thelema, Crowley's universal hexagram, which matched very much with
the pentacle in the middle.
A tilted version of what Franklin was showing.
Yeah, and the 5 is always in the center. Yeah, it's the same sort of pathway as well, isn't it? Yeah,
it's an inside out, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's showing, when I'm looking at this, it's showing like the 2 and the 4 relationship, right? The 4 and the 2.
Because the version you showed was actually tilted. I can't tilt this because it's on here, but it was like tilted. Like the other one I had up was with this being in the northeast quadrant and this being in the southwest quadrant. So the numbers these would be touching on that grid would be totally different.
There's another thing to mention about this as well. See, whenever you see these sort of really crooked lines, like what you see with the unicursal hexagram, you see it with the hexagram as well. You also see it with even the triangle as or the pyramid as a generative symbol. If you take the 7, which is the number of Saturn, of course, the seventh day, Saturn's day, Shabbat, Shabbatai, in classical astronomy, the last planet, the 7th planet, including that of the Sun, was Saturn. So it was associated with 7. You obviously have the 7 chakras and all of that as well. I mean, Saturn isn't inherently evil. It's just, it is malefic, but it's required within the, I guess, the mosaic of the psyche. But you'll notice all of this is established by 7s. I'm sure if you were to, to count out the 7s that really form this unicursal hexagram, it would probably come to 9 7s, right? Which form all of the various angles. And that was another name for Kronos, which is the Hellenic equivalent of Saturn. Obviously, he's associated with time, the father of time. So he was called Kronos Anglometes, which is literally time, the crooked one, or the one who plots and deceives in darkness. Another thing with Kronos too, linking it with Set and also Yahweh, at least in the later formulations of Judaism, is that within Kronos' name you have the Greek word onos, which is the donkey. So obviously, again, later on, this is after the Hyksos, the Proto-Israelites invaded Egypt, you had Set and the enigmatic, previously enigmatic, Typhonian beast of Set. It was associated with the Set beast was associated with the donkey or the ass because the Hyksos syncretized it into their religion. So you have that connection to. I believe it's also called the Alexandromenos graffiti, which is the earliest depiction of Jesus Christ, which is of course a derogatory and it's a derogatory or derisory what would you call it? Sort of projection of Christ, a conveyance of Christ, and he has the head of a donkey. So that was there. It was, that belief, this the Abrahamic deity, or at least the Setian and Typhonian deity, was associated with the donkey too. Of course, linking it then with Kronos, linking it with Saturn, linking it with all of these unicursal hexagrams and the sigil of Saturn too. Sorry, man.
It's very interesting what you've, like, when you look at this picture, I'm seeing Isis. Can we bring that back, Chris?
Oh yeah, my bad.
I'm seeing the picture of the lineage of Uranus, right, and Gaia, showing the so Uranus's number would be number 4 if you're looking like old sources, Chaldean, Vedic, whatever, right? And the lunar number has always been 2. So I see this like almost in a way representing a very subtle story of history, where you've got Selena, the lunar goddess, which is the offspring of the number 4, which is Uranus, with Gaia in the middle, right? The Earth. And in this depiction, we're showing here, interesting, the 5-petaled flower, which I think represents life, right? Physical life being in the body. So without the number 5, you can't have the golden spiral of Phi coming into being. So if you think of it in those terms, then you can see it's very interesting, because she then becomes the one that fosters the lineage of Titans. And then Kronos, becoming her big cheese, swings his proverbial dick around, yeah? And he challenges his father Uranus and cuts it off, right? Castrates his father Uranus. So Isis becomes the ending of her father due to the line that she progenerates. And interestingly enough, the Titans, I think it relates to the giants of the Nephilim and the Anakim, right? Which I think relates to the Ashura and the Rakshas, as they called in other places, Yakshas. I think that's the Middle Eastern name for it, as it comes from Syria and Persia and those places. It was called Yakshas. So and then they've got a reversed story of the story there as well, which is really interesting, because the Yakshas were the good guys and the Devas were the bad guys. So you've got all of this polarity, but it's almost as if this picture is designed to create dissension, right? It's meant to create like a one against the other. Instead of all five being in a state of balance, right, harmony, there's one and one that's competing, and the other four are being pushed to the side. And I think that's like quite an interesting concept, because it almost sort of suggests, in the same way that it can be seen or suggested in this other sigil, right, that that fundamentally what we've got is a division here with this line, and it's that 6-4 line. And the 6-4 line needs to cancel out the 5's ability to move. Now, when you cancel out the 5's ability to move, right, then you end up with a dichotomy like this. Because the 5 is locked in the center, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's locked in the center of something that can go nowhere.
Yeah.
Because it's only expanding in two directions. So does that make sense, or am I being too obtuse?
No, you're absolutely correct. It's basically the fallen star of man is locked in the soul trap. I mean, ultimately that's the metaphor behind it, isn't it? And like what you're saying, if it's moving in a sort of binary, again, this is where the sort of donkey idea of Saturn comes in, the he-haw, the 1 and the 0. So you have this binary, right, again. And of course, like what you're saying, if it's moving equally, and this is where the egalitarianism and the equality comes in that we saw with the Masonic revolutions in France and such, which is nothing to do with equality at all, true equality. Again, it's this principle that it's moving up, down, left, right, equally, forever. Therefore, there is no potential that entropy can enter the system. Because for entropy to enter the system, there would have to be, one of the sides, if you will, right? We'd have to give ground. We'd have to lag behind. So there's that sort of visualization, that allegory, that concept. As well, you also see the alchemical symbol for Earth is found both in Jupiter and in Saturn, along with the lunar crescent, or the Venetian crescent as well, which you see in Islam too, that symbol of Islam. But interestingly, the symbol of Earth is, well, it's either a circle with, the cross in between it, or just the cross, just the plus sign. So in Jupiter, the crescent is above. So there's a lunar ascendancy in that, hence it's generative, because the lunar is involved in the menstrual cycle, it's involved in the cycle of birth. And of course, with Saturn, the limiting principle, it's below that Earth. So Earth takes ascendancy. And of course, the lunar cycle is demoted. So when you're in a Saturnian cycle, there's less generation. There's more limitation. What appears to be that you're moving towards a consolidation of technological advancement in this case, right? You're actually not. you're moving towards less life, less freedom, less actual authenticity, less of all of these sorts of qualities that are generative to life, that life imbibes within. So there's just that concept to bring up too with the alchemical symbols of Jupiter and Saturn. So both the moon or Venus, the moon and the Earth are combined in both of those as a compound image, as a compound sigil.
Yeah, I mean, the cube's right there.
Yeah, brother, I love that you're putting that there, because it sort of shows, in a sense, what we're talking about is this number 4, right? Which is the 4 sides of the square. And when that 4 sides of the square is bound, in other words, when Venus 6 is bound with this 4 in this way, you end up with a stuck structure. But when you take the principle of the Merkaba and you put the Merkaba inside the cube, then you've got the rotating axes of the 2 triangles, right? Moving in different directions, creating the potential for movement and energy. The cube on its own is very stuck. And I think that's what that reversal is trying to do. It's trying to lock Venus up in a cube. And Venus is like the goddess of love, of beauty, of harmony, but also of life. Because love, harmony, and beauty is what reflects the 5 from the 5 to the 6. So Mercury's phi, mathematic and ability to construct a map, if you will. In other words, 4 has got the map, but Mercury needs to communicate that map. And Mercury needs to communicate the map of 4 to 6 so that 6 can put it into dynamic motion with the Merkaba, so that the 7 can awaken us to the balancing of the 8 of the physical and the spiritual, so that we can get to that idealistic place of number 9 and start putting it into a context where we can take it to the next octave, starting the Enneagram again through, and keep the turning energy of the Enneagram. It's almost like they want the Enneagram to be stagnant, like they want everything to be stuck in this cube. And the cube only really holds a reflection for the etheric. And like I've often said, like in all of my, if you go and look at my 216 lectures, the cube keeps coming back. Every time I'm talking about the etheric, I'm talking about the cube and how the Sephirot are containers. But what is filling those containers is what we call the flow, the chakra. The chakra is the astral. But without the astral qualities to be in a state of movement to fill that cube, you've just got a stagnant shell, like a cadaver. Hence, cadaver. What an interesting word, huh? Kada.
I feel like we're missing a piece here. This 5 in the center kind of messes things up.
No, that shows Venus is locked up. That's right.
Yeah,
that's a hexagram.
Shouldn't it be like a 6 there? So then
that is a 6.
I mean, this the
so it basically shows that Venus, if you pull that thing up, it makes it a hexagram, right?
If I pull this down, you're saying?
Yeah, that's now a snowflake. Yeah. When you pull that down, it becomes a snowflake. Yeah. Now it's a hexagram. Now that hexagram shows you that in the center, behind the hexagram is an inactive Mercury, number 5. So you can't have the inner alchemy happening, because 5 can't activate 6. And without 5 activating 6, 4's knowledge gets lost. It's possible to reprogram. So instead of allowing the knowledge of 4 to be activated and communicated by 5 to 6, so that 6 can start the process of the inner, gateway to the mystery, so that you can get to 7. Once you get to 7, you're pretty much going to be able to apply that with 8, so that 9 can become like a ideal perfection of this completeness. And then the foundation is set for your spiritual development. Then you're going into the next octave and the next and the next and the next and the next. So they're locking you up. They're locking up 5 and they're locking up 6, which reverses the flow, so that 4 to 6 is stagnant. And there's no ability for 6 to communicate back to 4 through 5. Sorry, yeah.
This is what you see, I think, as well with the mandala and the yantra. I think the yantra is the machine, is it not? And it's this well, it's basically the squaring of the mandala, if I'm not mistaken. The mandala is the circle that surrounds it. So, and you have that same earthly symbol of the cross, which is again that plus or the crucifix or the four. There was something I posted as well there because it just sort of I just recalled it there. But if you look at what are called stellated octahedrons, which is basically the 3-dimensional version of the hexagram, if you were to sort of view that in a purely 2-dimensional projection like what you have here with the cube, it actually produces 12 vertices. So there's the 12 that comes into this as well, right, with the zodiac too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all encompassed with that. I just realized the time as well, Chris. I'm gonna have to.
I just saw it.
I'm gonna have to head out and get some shopping.
You know, we got to start doing that. I think there's a way to do like 2 hours countdown from whenever we start, whenever we're all here. We should just do 2 hours and then just let it count down to 0, and then they cut us off because we'll just keep talking forever. Oh shoot! Why does this keep happening with my?
Right, gentlemen.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh wait. Oh, I think Franklin's muted.
I was muted. Sorry. I was saying we can just carry on talking from the same point next week if you guys want.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Just continue the conversation, or we can grab a new topic, whichever. We can figure it out during the week. But thank you, guys. You're right.
Awesome.
I've just realized 2 hours and a half. Gosh.
Yeah.
I gotta go and check
Silas,
on my boy.
will you
I'm
be able to
seeing
join
through
us
the window
next week?
playing with the birds. He's supposed to be doing his class.
Oh, you gotta.
Well, he's done his class. He's supposed to be doing his homework. Little bugger.
Silas, will you be able to come join us next week?
I won't actually. I'm away on holiday.
Okay.
So
Well, me
I
and
will be
Franklin
able
we'll hold down the fort.
yeah, I'll be able to join the next week after that. Right,
Awesome.
guys, take it easy.
Thanks for joining us, brother.
Where are you going for holiday, brother?
Oh, just up north to the Highlands. So I'm doing a bit of
You
quite a
said
lot-
like it's no big
lot
deal.
of walking.
Enjoy it, man.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
We're getting some
Beautiful.
good weather as well now, so hopefully it holds up and we get
I
clear
had
blue skies.
some of the best ale I'd had anywhere in the UK there, by the way.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of craft breweries up here. Yeah. So
Some of the
that's-
best ale I've ever drank in my life up in the Highlands. Anybody who likes ales, go to the Scottish Highlands. It's well worth the journey. And the forests are amazing.
And Silas, my Scottish brother, I hope you enjoyed your birthday, man.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I'm getting closer to the 30 mark, but yeah, I did enjoy it.
Yes, you have plenty of time, man. You're young.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Yeah, it was good. I went out for a very nice meal and yeah, just chilled and had a wee walk through the woods here, so it was nice.
Awesome.
With your girlfriend.
No, just on my own actually. She's not one for walking through the woods. She hates the woods. She finds it scary. So I have to go alone. Hopefully I don't get lost.
Man.
Like I bring a ball of string with me, you know. Just no, I'm joking about that, but no, my parents are not too bad. So anyway, gentlemen, have a superb day, and it was a fascinating discussion as always.
Absolutely. You too, brother.
Take it easy.
Absolutely loved it. Blessings
And,
to you.
Franklin, thank you for hosting us on your platform and everything. I know you pay for StreamYard and stuff, and I know it takes up a lot of space, so it's much appreciated.
God bless you. Have an absolutely lovely day. I hope
too,
everybody
brother.
in the chat enjoyed it. And check out Silas's at Silas Speaks channel. Check out Chris's channel, which is at
Chris Miner Official, or just Linktree
Miner
me at
Official.
linktree.com/Chris Miner, and you can find every link that I have.
I got confused there for a moment. I was thinking about the name of your band, and I was like, no, psych.
Yeah,
We were talking about that.
everything's on the Linktree. If you ever just want to link that on underneath, if you link stuff, just to linktree.com. It's Linktree, link.t. It's like the way they do it.
You know what?
tr.ee/Chris Miner.
Why don't both of you send me an email,
Do you want me to send it in Telegram?
and then I'll put it on the round table link tree as well, because then when I
might
do
have
the
already
round
did- you
table,
might have
will
already did
also
it
be
with
able to
me.
link it to then. And I haven't actually gone to the round table link tree in a long time. I should do it.
You might have put me on it already, but
Silas, do please send me your link tree, because the link tree is really a good thing, man. It's like a tree. I love trees. God bless you, Silas. God bless you, Chris. Have an absolutely
too.
lovely day.
you too, brother.
Enjoy.
You too, Silas.
Thank you, guys. It's been an
Take it
honor.
easy, everyone.
I'll talk
Bye.
with y'all soon.
Big love.